Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron. I hope you're having a great day or night in Jesus. The Crucified God by Moltmann. Kind of in mainstream Christianity, Moltmann is considered to be one of the greatest theologians of the past 75 years or so. You know, I did some study on Moltmann. I want to say, I think he was kind of like a socialist kind of guy, and also I don't want to misrepresent him at all, and some of you, I'm positive, know much more about Moltmann than I do. I just did some internet searches and read on him, and then I did some other internet searches on other people, so I may get them all messed up. But I get these type things, you know, being oneness Pentecostal, you see the crucified God, you're like, oh, okay, this is something that could be big time. And I think this is part of a trilogy. So I've been reading through it. I haven't read the whole book, but let me just read a few things from here. And you can kind of get, just from these little few selections, I think you can kind of get at least some of what he's trying to get at here. So again, thanks for being with us. Check out our other videos, subscribe. For Christian faith, this means that it can no longer understand itself only in the context of its place in world history, of the history and success of Christianity, but must recall the event in which it originated. The primary existent for faith revealed not only to faith as revelation, the first thing to bring faith into being is, as far as Christian faith is concerned, Christ, the crucified God. If any one of the historical forms in which it has exposed itself grow out of date as its educational process is completed, it is not sufficient simply to distill out the idea inherent in that form of Christianity. Instead, the Christian faith which once conquered the world must also learn to conquer its own forms when they have become worldly. And so at the bottom, like the footnotes, it's got a footnote by Martin Heidegger, who I think ended up kind of siding with the Nazis, didn't he? Didn't he, the guy that did Being and Nothingness, studied philosophy for a long time, years ago, been out of it for a while. And then Karl Marx also in the bottom. So you can see he calls Jesus crucified God. Now, people make nuances about that. I'm trying to shift my chair. You know, obviously that God can't die. God is a spirit, so it has to be the sonship, the humanity that passed away. And then he quotes from Fichte. I think that's how you say it, F-I-C-H-T-E. And I want to say Fichte, or Fichte, he was in the Illuminati, like legit Illuminati, not weird Illuminati, but legitimate. Okay, the divinity of Jesus can only be concluded a posteriori in the end of his history, as the Gospels tell us. But the prologue of the Gospel of John supplies the corresponding a priori of his being and his origin in God. From Fichte on, they interpreted this prologue as the metaphysics of the Gospel history. The reversal of thought occurs in Fichte. The originally divine idea of a particular standpoint in time can not, for the most part, be asserted, this is Fichte he's quoting, until the man inspired by God comes and carried it out. That's what divine man does as divine. And then, so one of the footnotes down here, like Dorner, I've heard of, I don't know anything about, but it's got like a G.W.F. Hegel quote. And this quote by Dorner, boy, it goes into, see, I've studied a lot of Hegel, through the philosophy of Schelling, who now Schelling, I think, was legitimately in the Illuminati too. And Hegel, the idea of the incarnation, Hegel probably was, but I don't think there's any, his name is not on a list, but I think, anyhow, came to be acknowledged. It is essential to the idea of the Godhead to enter into finitude, to descend it into its contrary being, but also eternally to elevate itself out and to restore itself. Just so much, and therefore knowing itself as God, man. Because, so when you see Fichte and Hegel, you know, if you read Marx, it's constantly the dialectic. It's not, he'll make a quote, like a common quote, and then he'll do the opposite. He'll say the opposite quote. And then he's got a big thing about Pannenberg in here, and Immanuel Kant, which Immanuel Kant, many people think he was the greatest philosopher of the last 300 years or so, he or Rousseau. As far as he can, Kant avoids the name of Jesus in these discussions in order to present the idea of mankind pleasing to God as a pure example of practical faith. Even the Holy One of the Gospel must be first compared with our ideal of moral perfection before we can recognize him to be such. Now, Schleiermacher, he was probably oneness in some sense. He was also very liberal. A lot of people trace the origin of the charismatic movement, at least their theology, to Schleiermacher. He's got some Schleiermacher in here. I won't read those quotes. And then he's got Srage and Weth, which I don't know anything about. Okay, in the theological context of his life, talking about Jesus and preaching, the issue of the death is not the general paradox of confidence in God and abandonment by God, but of all of that, of the deity of his God and his Father. The rejection expressed in his dying cry and accurately interpreted by the words of Psalm 22, accurately translated, must therefore be understood strictly as something which took place between Jesus and his Father. This is the reason he's considered a big proponent of the social Trinity, which even like Francis Schaeffer was big into that. In the other direction between Jesus and the Father and Jesus, the Son, that is something which took place between God and God. The abandonment on the cross, which separates the Son from the Father, is something that takes place within God himself. It is God against God. So, I got it for the title, The Crucified God. I'm still glad I got it. It's interesting. And so he goes into 3 Christological chapters. This is chapter 6, The Crucified God, beginning with the concept of God, which seeks to understand the God-forsakenness of Jesus on the cross. And I wanted to read a footnote here. Is the theistic concept of God applicable to Christian belief in the crucified God? Now, I will say, around this time when he's writing in the 60s and 70s, you had the big God is dead movement, which had its outgrowth really out of Nietzscheism. A lot you could say there, but he says this. Let me just say this first. The footnote 35, explanation of thesis 28 as a commentary. See the novels of Dostoevsky and on them, M. Dorn, God and Mensch in Dostoevsky's work. And then footnote 36, theism here primarily refers to that natural knowledge of God, which is taken up by the Catholic and Protestant tradition in the article De Dio Uno, and then more generally to monotheistic philosophy and its political, moral, and cosmological significance. See Alfred North Whitehead, Process and Reality, which he's considered to be really the father of mathematical process theology, which a lot of people would say that's the root of openness, open theology. In the great formative period of theistic philosophy, which ended with the rise of Mohammedanism, after continuance coeval with civilization, 3 strains of thought emerged, which amid many variations of detail respectively fashioned God in the image of an imperial ruler, God in the image of personification of moral energy, God in the image of an ultimate philosophical principle. So, and it's big book. Good size print. It's almost 500 pages. See the transformation from God and the liberations of men. So like liberation theology. I'll let you see the size of the print. It's Fortress Press, which is Lutheran publishing house. Jürgen Moltmann studied Christian theology in England, and after his return to Germany in Göttingen, he served as pastor from 1952 to 58 in Bremen, not Bremen, Georgia, I don't think. From 1967, he was professor of systematic theology in the University of Tübingen. I think that's how you say it. I've seen it written for years, I don't know. Until he retired in 94. So one of his books is The Trinity in the Kingdom, 1981, The Spirit of Life, 1992, The Coming of God, winner of the Grawemeyer Award 2000, Theology of Hope. So anyhow, there we have it. It's got a blurb in here from Yale Divinity School, Miroslav Wolf, not Yaroslav Pelikan, which is another Yale good historian, by the way, Christian historian. So there we have it, the crucified God, you know, the Son. It was Jesus in flesh that died. The Spirit couldn't die. God bless. Talk with you later. Thanks for being with us. Check out our other videos. Join us for our services. God bless. Bye.